Well, how y'all doing this afternoon? We are on my patio this afternoon, and we're just sitting here chatting. It's two old guys in a rocking chair this afternoon. I got Jim Lumpkin with me, a good friend of mine who runs Lake Country Fishing, the paid website that covers Oconee and Sinclair. And Jim's also a member of the Striper Club, and he helps us out a good deal with that. And we've got a bunch of other connections, but that's the important stuff. And we're just going to kind of chat a little bit this afternoon about kind of the shape of the tournaments that have been going on at Oconee and Sinclair, how the bass fishing's been this year, some things that may impact both our lakes, and kind of what's going on. Thanks.
Sounds great. No, I appreciate the invitation. It's always good to talk with you. Look forward to working. We're going to a meeting with the Striper Club tonight. Hope to see you out there. And it's been now that has really been a true blessing and an honor to be associated with. So those gentlemen and ladies do a phenomenal job up there. And James is the president. So from an administrative standpoint, he's done a great job with the club. And I'll take this opportunity to say if you fish on lake, I don't care what you do, I don't care what level of skill you have, I don't care whether you're male or female, it really doesn't matter. You will benefit from joining the Striper Club and going to some of the meetings. And it's the most helpful group of fishermen that you're going to find in a club anywhere. It's not, I was shocked. It was not hush hush, can't tell you that, that's my secret. It's very collaborative, and the initiative is really to help all fishermen and to improve their skill sets. And so you do get a lot of help. So James, you've done a phenomenal job steering them in the right direction. You got a great club. It's very enjoyable to be there, and I look forward to the meeting tonight.
Well, I appreciate that. We when we started it, that was we had two things in mind: that we wanted to help everybody learn how to fish here and how to striper fish, striper and hybrids and white bass. We wanted to kind of figure out more about the fishery. We wanted to protect it a little bit, but we wanted to have fun while doing it. And we've tried very hard to balance money with that.
Mm-hmm.
When we have monthly tournaments, we have stuff like that, but it's really just for the bragging rights. I mean, you're not going to win a new boat if you win the tournament. Matter of fact, with the price of gas these days, you'll barely cover your gas costs. So
I don't think
it's more for the bragging rights.
Right. I don't think you're alone in that concern.
Yeah, boat gas and truck gas is a big factor right now.
I'm
$7 a gallon in Florida the other day.
I think the explosion in the kayak industry should demonstrate that we got to look for alternative means of fishing rather than running, from one end of the lake to the other to catch 1 to 2 fish and then moving along from the tournament trail perspective.
I think it'll have a huge impact eventually. The guys who get, who have BP or Citgo picking up their gas bill, it ain't gonna bother them.
Right.
The weekend tournament angler, the BFL guys and stuff like that, I think it's really gonna start to.
I think we've
already
seen a little bit of that from the tournaments that I cover, particularly the smaller tournaments. And this is unique from, or different. When we get into the summer, June, mid to late June, July, and August, before school goes back in particular, the tournaments for the most part are either early in the morning and half days. Let's get off, come in at 6 o'clock, get off at 11, or they're night tournaments.
Yeah.
Because it's very challenging to compete, during the summer with
100-degree
recreational, boats and things of that type. So that being said, if you're sitting here and you're only going to fish for 3 or 4 hours, which will, we do have a number of tournaments, potluck tournaments that do that. You got to go. Let's see. I'm going to fish for 3 hours and I'm going to spend $250 in gas. There's been some reduction in participation. Hasn't been drastic yet, but if this sustains, it could.
Yeah, that's what I'm afraid of, is the sustainability of this. And I'm too old and fat and tired to paddle everywhere. I did that when I was younger.
I am too, but that's why we have kids. So we put them in the front of the
canoe.
boat. That's it.
But well, what's been the how's the tournament season been? How's the late spring, early summer shaped up so far?
The
on
summer,
both lakes?
yeah, the summer on both lakes really is kind of unique. Is our downtime. Up until let's say June, we were averaging anywhere from 3 to 5 tournaments a weekend, and sometimes per day on the weekends. Once you get into really June, you're competing with the heat. You're competing with the heat impacts the bass, and therefore the fishing is a lot tougher. You're also impacted with recreational watercraft that are out there, and which has had a huge impact on both lakes. Some of you may not like this statement, but I mean the larger boats create some substantial wakeboard boats create some substantial wakes, and as the fish move into deeper water and people are fishing more in not back in the pockets, then they see that that wake is impacting it much more. So quite frankly, in June and July, it is other than the night tournaments, the early morning tournaments, and an occasional benefit type tournament, it's really the season's
Kinda
over.
died now.
There'll be a fall series starting up in late August, and so you have some in August and September. Then in October is really where it starts to come back to full time, and the calendar gets full about that time.
Yeah, well, I mean, I can sympathize with that. I don't. If I get on the water on the weekend, I'm on the water before daylight and I'm off before 9. I mean, there's no two ways about it. I don't like being on the water with jet skis and everything else. And y'all are allowed to use the lake just like everybody else, but that's just my preference. And I live near the lake, so I can fish whenever the heck I want to for the most part. So.
Well, I actually
choose.
live on the lake,
Yeah.
and so it's easy for me to drop my boat in and go fish for a little while. But if you, from the tournament perspective, if you're driving an hour to get here, then you go fish, for 3 or 4 hours, then you got to return. And you think about all the, we talk about gas. Gas has an impact on that. It's and the whole 3, 4, 5 hours that you're on the water, you're battling, the recreational use of the lake. Then it's just a downtime. It's a great time to take a breather, be with the family, and then get ready when in the late summer. So like I said, late August, and starting in September when things cool down a little bit, and the kids go back to school.
Well, what in regards to Sinclair, and we talked about a couple of things before we hit record here, but there's only a couple of them that we'll put on camera.
It wasn't that bad, truthfully.
We just named names. That was all there was to it. What do you think the impact is going to be on our new oxygen system down there for you guys at Sinclair? You live on the lake. How do you think that's going to impact? What are your fishermen saying that fish Sinclair all the time?
It's kind of an interesting story. The tournament fishermen, the local or regional tournament fishermen that fish both lakes, and that is a lot. The bulk of the tournament players that fish both lakes know about it, don't know a tremendous amount about it, and really haven't kept up with the publications and the potential impact. From Sinclair's standpoint, to this point, there hasn't been a lot of notice to it because it supposedly was going on Lake Oconee. Yeah. Now, recently there have been a couple of articles that have been published, very good articles, by the way, that I would encourage you to they were on Facebook, so you might look them up there. They talked about the potential impact. I think once that information comes out, and this is completely non-George Power, this is completely Jim's opinion, the impact has the potential to impact Lake Sinclair greater than it impacts Lake Oconee. at least at the on the backside of Wallace Dam.
Simply because they're doing most of the oxygen generation when they pump water out of Lake Oconee into Lake Sinclair.
That
put more
was
dissolved oxygen back
recent
in the water.
information for me. I wasn't aware of that, but I did see that. So if that's the case, then the oxygen is quite likely a huge component of it is going into Sinclair. So I think it's kind of a wait and see, from that standpoint. Unfortunately, I don't know. I'm sure some of the local guides and fishermen probably have a better perspective than I do, but I'm not sure what the impact on Oconee is really going to be. Probably more so from the bass fisherman perspective, because with the oxygen diffusers, which by the way I saw, we all talk about electronics in fishing. I actually saw a picture.
It's amazing.
With some of the bubbles that are coming up.
Looks like a daggum volcano.
And
I've seen it on mine, and during our last tournament I saw it.
It's really interesting to see that, and but I think the intent or the hope, desire for the Oconee residents and fishermen was to impact the striper and hybrid population during the summer, with those deeper waters. I don't know that that's going to be the end result as far as who benefits the most from that.
I'd love to hear a different opinion on this, but it kind of seems to be our consensus. And I'm not speaking on behalf of the club. This is just me saying it from what I gather, from what I see, from what I've learned about it. Number one, I think it's going to be a couple of years before we see what actually happens.
Yeah.
And then number two, I don't hold a lot of hope for it really helping what we were hoping that it would deal with, which is the fact that our stripers and hybrids leave and go up the river because of the lack of oxygen in the lake. So they run all the way up to, I guess it's Barnett Shoals Dam, or forget which one it is, but it's between here and Watkinsville.
Right.
They run all the way up there, and they run as far as they can up the Alcovey River as well.
Right.
Or not the Alcovey River. What am I trying to say? Whatever the heck the other river
Up the river.
Up the river. Yeah, we got two.
Where you and I stay a lot, up the river.
Exactly. Can't think of it right now. It's awful. The left-hand side, the one that flows out of Gwinnett County. Right-hand side comes out of that god-awful place called Athens.
It's been a pleasure talking to you guys. I don't know why he would inject something that's so foolish as that, talking about my beloved Bulldogs.
Exactly. But with that being said, I think no matter what, the end result will be a couple of years in the making, because they're already kind of ingrained into making that move. On our end of it, they're already making that move.
The thing that was
almost like it's just a genetic thing now.
If you've seen this, and it was kind of interesting, this most recent article, and I wish I had written down the author. It was really good. Said that the program doesn't begin until August.
They've been running it some, though.
Right.
We don't know when and how and all that, but yeah, we've heard that it's not. We've been told, members of the club have been told by Georgia Power people and DNR that it's not fully functioning, that they're not fully utilizing it.
And with it being associated with discharge, you can bet that you'll never know the schedule of when it'll be used. It'll be, and that, particularly in the summer, that is, we're talking about a point, the current and water flow has huge impact on the bite during the summer. I mean, it always does, but especially bass bite in particular. If the water is not moving, it can be real stagnant, and you can, it's almost in many cases like if you go out and the water's not moving, you see no your cork, if you're crappie fishing or whatever is stagnant, you might as well pack your lunch and go in or do whatever. But once that water starts, and no one knows when it does, I mean, we as a resident, there's some history, so you can kind of guess some parts.
Yeah.
As a general rule, that's when your bite's going to occur.
Yeah, and it's with the striper fishing on the Oconee side, it doesn't seem to impact it as much. I won't say that I don't see a uptick in it, but I also don't know that that isn't just kind of, I'm looking forward and I'm fishing more when I think they're going to generate, and when they generate, I get excited and fish better. I mean, you focus more, you do more, it's a perpetual thing.
It
So I
absolutely
think
has an impact on Sinclair. I think it does here, but maybe not quite to the level. But on Sinclair, it's
I think
substantial.
if you start fishing for largemouth here, it has a huge impact. Has a huge impact. But with that being said, now one interesting thing that we've been seeing, and you and I talked about this, spotted bass on Lake Oconee.
Oh, there aren't any.
Yeah, there's none. Y'all don't try to catch them.
Don't go to Lake Country Fishing and look for the lake record that was caught during a Berries tournament up here, because there aren't any. I happened to be there and witnessed that. If I recall, it was 5.2 was the lake record. It was on certified scales because it was caught during a Berries tournament.
That's a hell of a spotted bass.
That's a good sized bass.
I mean, I've only caught 6 or 8 bigger than that in my life, and I've been fishing for them for a long time.
During the tournaments, I don't see a lot, and I think the reason is because we don't have a substantial amount of the large ones. Have they been caught? Yes, but you're only allowed to bring 5 fish, to the
Bring a
scale.
small one in.
So the probability of you catching a large spot, or is not as great right now as a largemouth. So we haven't seen a lot brought to the scales, but it's certainly. I think we'd be naive not to believe that there's growth in the spotted bass population on Lake Oconee. And what is the long-term impact? There's a lot of concern and warranted, about the impact of the spots if the population increases.
Yeah.
On the largemouth population in Oconee in particular.
Yeah, and that, I mean, it is an understandable thing. I will say, on a personal note, I mean, my latest column is about fishing for spots. I'd pay money to have a bunch of 5-pound spots here that I could chase on a regular basis. That would excite me to no end. But I understand what we're talking about. But however, this is an impoundment. We changed the ecology of this area when we impounded that lake in 1979.
Right.
So, it's everything's off the board and up for fair game, in my opinion, right now.
Well,
we stock stripers, we stock hybrids.
I've been on Lake Sinclair since 1960. So I have seen, and at that time, there were very, very few houses. There was very little development. And so I've seen it grow from nothing to the massive population of residents and to the growth, and I also was in this area when Oconee was, laid out and was built, filled and all that, and the massive growth that, Oconee has experienced. So yes, we've gone, there are a lot of triggers that have caused some transitions in fishing patterns, behaviors, etc. I mean, if we in our recent memory, Sinclair, had a power plant down there.
Oh yeah,
Huge impact for
wintertime.
For many. I mean, during the winter, you could practically walk boat to boat to boat to go all the way across it because the water was so warm coming out coming out of the back end of it there, and it was, people would go back there, fish for crappie all night, and load the boats because the fish habitually knew to go to that area. Now, look at the other side of the coin. It was always, an area of an issue during the summer because you could see a 10 degree or more variance in surface water temperature, going from one area to another in that general proximity of that power plant.
And we're talking about Plant Branch over there.
Plant Harley Branch.
That part right above 441, right into there. Yeah.
And so now you've got oxygen diffusers here on Oconee. You've got
Getting to be like Star Trek.
Well, you have to take the circumstances, the environment. I mean, we've seen, and we may talk a little bit about this. We've seen hydrilla, substantially increase in Sinclair, and it is in Oconee as well. Maybe not at this point to the level that it is in Sinclair, but it is here, and it will be something to address. Georgia Power has issued their statements on how they're, on their engagement and control, and we'll see. That's been adjusted over the years. We'll see how that works out.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. It'll be it's interesting that we're talking about hydrilla and spots at the same time. Captain McFarr and I were fishing back in October down here, and he said, "I hear y'all got some spots coming," and I said, "Yeah, we're catching some here and there." I said, my son caught one back in the last winter, and I said, it's interesting because we got that and we got grass growing at the same time. It's two opposite sides of the coin right there. It's going to be which lands heads up is going to be a whole lot to do with the future of Lake Oconee. We get a lot of grass, there'll be a lot of places for the largemouth to be protected. Spots will be on bare rocky points out there and stuff like that.
When and that kind of segues into a good conversation as we talk about the different species and talk about what the fishing patterns are for them.
Yeah.
I'm a resident, of Lake Sinclair, and so I can speak both from a resident standpoint as well as from a tournament perspective and from a fisherman standpoint. And that I don't think there's any question. Most of the fishermen would say that the bass fishing in Sinclair has improved drastically since the increase of the hydrilla. I don't think any residents would say they appreciate it very much, but I think that's probably a pretty consistent opinion. How and the one thing just in general that is I think most of our bass fishermen would agree is that both lakes are really shallow water bite bass lakes.
Very much so.
That being said, and this is probably where the two lakes differ to some degree, Sinclair is basically a shallow water bite, period. There is some offshore, fishing, and everybody has different opinions about what an offshore is. At 5 foot, is it 10 foot, whatever the case may be. But let's say
depends on where you're standing. A little variation in the bottom is a big deal to a fish that's only this tall.
It does, and even right now, your top water bait, bite early in the morning until the sun gets up is consistent on both lakes. That's your prime time, your quality fish, your best opportunity to catch those quality fish, the tournament winners, those types of things. However, that's not to say if you don't have, your limit by 9 o'clock that you might as well head to the house. But it does say that, particularly as the temperature gets warmer, the pattern changes a little bit, and there's more availability of an offshore bite, a true offshore bite on points, on ledges, on deeper water on Oconee than you typically will see on Sinclair. If I'm fishing, if my offshore bite, let's say in the middle of the day in the early afternoon, might be up to 12 feet, on Sinclair. That's a deep
part of
water.
Sinclair.
On Oconee, you probably add another 5 feet to it, maybe 8 feet, maybe up to 20 feet, but definitely another 5 feet to it for that, crankbait, deep cranks, those kind of things to get that deeper offshore bite. I can't tell you why, but it seems like, years ago, I remember on Sinclair, after it hit June, July, we got into the 90s temperature-wise and all that. All your bass boats were sitting off. We're finding holes, we're finding deep ledges, and we're off. They were fishing structure and way out. You don't see as much of that now. It's gone to dock fishing. Find the shade in that regard. Look for a mayfly pattern. Look for the bluegill patterns. Catch those early bites in the morning, and then if if all that ceases, then try to find some level of offshore bite surrounded by structure. I just think that as a general rule, that when we get to that tough time of the day when the heat gets up, you're going to have more fish and more fishermen in a little bit deeper water on Oconee than you would typically see on Sinclair.
Yeah, and that's not to say that, I mean, certainly I am positive that you could catch a drop shot fish right now on Oconee. And you can in the wintertime. I've done it a few times. But it seems to be a lot of the more productive patterns are deep cranking. And I got a buddy who's going to remain nameless on this because I think he's fishing a tournament coming up here. That's cranking 25, 30 feet and finding some stuff.
He learned that from Lanier.
Probably did.
But he's down in Florida now, right?
Might be.
Okay.
Might be. And
not that we know who we're talking about, but
but you've also got you got a flutter spoon bite on this lake. It's kind of in the same kind of water. Now, me personally, if I go out, if it wasn't thundering right now and I didn't have a meeting tonight, I'd be fishing, and I'd be fishing deep docks this evening, mainly with a wacky rig or a shaky head. That's what I'm gonna be doing. If I'm not doing that, I will find some, I'll find the harder points and get in 15, 20 feet of water, something like that, and throw a Carolina rig or throw a big Zoom monster, something like that. But I go to almost an all soft plastic myself.
Right.
This time of
slowing
year.
it down.
Yeah, I'm more comfortable going slow, going deep like that and all that. Fishing shade, trying to find the cooler water for them.
And I think that's pretty prevalent, but I mean, years ago,
the
big old monster, 10-inch worms, throwing it in 30 foot of water and bringing it up onto a platform was very, very prevalent.
Remember those big old Jean LaRue swamp monster worms?
I started on those 3-ring big old monster things that, I mean, it would take an alligator to swallow. But, and I think, we go back to it. I mean, there are a couple of differences. The lakes are, connected. There are a lot of similarities, but there are a lot of differences too. The bait fish population in the two lakes is different.
What is and that brings up another thing. On the tournament side of it, you're dealing with people who fish with a whole lot more lakes in their quiver. Mm-hmm. What are they saying about herring?
Hadn't been a huge conversation until the latter part of the season this year. There were some discussions about it, and I mean, not by everyone. I think it we talked about the spots. I think the herring may be another new area of concern.
Yeah, and there are a number of Lanier fishermen who claim that they've seen them here on the lake. And it's mostly down from, if you're familiar with Lake Oconee, it's mostly down at the islands in front of Richland Creek, down to the dam at several different rocky points. But they're talking about seeing, and up Richland Creek in some of the deeper rocky points.
Right.
They're talking about seeing small schools moving very fast on their electronics. And that's a key to that's a signal that it's herring on that. It can be gizzard shad, and we have a lot of gizzard shad up here. But I tend to think from some of the things that I'm seeing and I'm hearing from people that I really respect that we got at least some herring.
I haven't heard. I don't recall hearing anything necessarily from Sinclair. It's been mostly the tournaments that were up here, and it wasn't a major issue, and certainly not a pattern. At this time, but I have heard some dialogue about it, and I think once again you go back to Oconee as being yes, it is a great largemouth lake, but if you look at the volume of fishermen on the lake, they're fishing more for stripers, hybrids, crappie, that type of thing, as far as just the number of fishermen.
Which is amazing because Oconee's producing some big largemouth right now. In the last couple of years, we've produced a lot of big largemouth in and out of tournaments.
It has been a great year for largemouth on really on both lakes. Once we got past the real screwy weather early on with all the rain, it was hilarious. Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, you go out and pre-fish. You got a reasonable pattern. Got it locked in. You lay off on Thursday, and guess what? On Friday, the bottom falls out, and this happened week after week after week.
It dropped 30 degrees. It rained 3 inches.
It drops 30 degrees. It rains at least 3 inches, and the water clarity goes from crystal clear or slightly stained to muddy as it comes. We've had some long, this year we had a lot of very hard rains that caused flooding in both of the lakes. And when I say flooding, I mean it was limited, and George Power did a great job of minimizing the amount of damage. But the fact of the matter is, there's a lot of floating debris and all those kind of things, to the level that certain tournaments got canceled because of the concern for of the floating debris predominantly. But bass fishing will fish in mud. They'll fish.
But you lose a lower unit real quick running down Oconee after something like that.
Well,
I mean, it gets dangerous fast because so much stuff flows down the two rivers that we have.
Sinclair is the same way up in many of the areas. When coming out of all the creeks, I mean, the bottom line is it's the water coming out of the creeks, and it's the water movement.
Yeah.
And this year, I mean, they opened up, I want to say 4 gates at one time to let water discharge, which is pretty substantial discharge from Georgia Power.
Yeah. Well, what do you think, just so we can, we both got to get to the meeting here, but what do you think well, first of all, I'll tell you what, let's back up just a second here. What does Lake Country Fishing do? We should have done this in the beginning. What does LakeCountryFishing.com do?
LakeCountryFishing.com, our goal is to be a single source for all fishing related information of all the species, all the predominant species, for both Lake Sinclair and Lake Oconee. We started on Sinclair, we grew into Oconee in January. This October will be 1 year total for us. We have a number of different things. I mean, we have to improve on this, but we have consistent fishing reports during the prime fishing time frames. The summer's been a huge challenge because people just haven't really fished as much, particularly from the tournament side. So,
those 100-degree days kind of shot it in the head for me a little while there too. So.
It does. So, we try to have timely and accurate fishing reports, and those fishing reports, quite frankly, are not the ones that we got last year that we're recycling, because the pattern is going to be about the same. And if I can make a generic fishing report, they're legit. They're not. What we try to do is, I don't care if it's a good report or a bad report. A bad report, and those are generally the ones I do for myself, where I don't catch anything, will tell you where not to go. So, and if I'm fishing, shallow, maybe you want to look out, so you can alter your pattern based upon those reports. So it's important not only just to get the 20-pound bag, type reports, and I was successful with this. It's equally as important to get the bad reports, where I went out for 8 hours and I caught 2 small ones, 3 small ones, and which help you say, well, that's not a pattern I really probably want to duplicate.
You weed that out before you hit the lake.
We've also, one of the things that we're going to be growing with a lot this year is we are very community focused. Tried to do, and we have been successful in sponsoring a number of benefits, tournaments that are up here of all different species. We want to get better at that. So in our first year, we had a lot of growing pains and are having some. So right now we're making some major changes to that I think add greater value to you, the fishermen, with some discount programs that are going to be available to us, and they're going to be huge to gain greater value for the membership. we're also going to be starting a podcast that you and I have been discussing for some time in the next 30, 45 days that I think we want to engage. We want the community to engage with us. We're going to provide a way for you to be involved. And so, a variety of topics. James is going to bring in maybe some of the Lake Oconee Striper clubs. I'll be bringing some of my pro staff and some of the real pro bass fishermen to be engaged. Some of the guides. We've got Joe Partenza, the Crappie Ninja, who will be joining us on occasions, who fishes both lakes, so he can talk about crappie fishing on both lakes.
That's because Joe's got it. He's big enough to cover both lakes.
I will not say that. We get along great, and I love Publix and Gray on the way up, so I have to be careful. But and we're working on. There are a couple of additions we'll be making this year on our pro staff to cover the catfishing part a lot.
That's a growing sport here on both lakes, but big time on Oconee. It's amazing.
It is an amazing thing to watch. I had truthfully until last year, and Jonathan West and 30/30 Ministries gave me the opportunity to be engaged in a tournament last year, and I'm looking at all of those river monsters come to the scales. We just Jonathan and Brad just put on a tournament I don't know 30 days ago, so I don't recall the exact date, and had 100 fishermen, 100 cat fishermen in boats that registered, turned down, and because of the size of the facility, had to turn down 65. So that's 165 potential boats to stay out there all night long to fish for catfish. So
it's amazing.
It's an amazing that things have of the growth of that industry. I've seen the same things here, and there have been some huge fish caught as well. There have been a number. In fact, there were 3 records for between Sinclair and Oconee caught within 24 hours on both lakes in one weekend. It was amazing. GON has an article. One of our great friends from GON has an article out about that. So yes, it's growing, and we're going to try to provide some feedback, some information, some helpful things. We do we do product reviews. We're going to have some things, instead of being a Bass Pro Shops or a catalog or having a plethora of things that you can fish with. Basically, the options we have a shop where you're going to be able to get some discounts on products and services, but those products and services, for the most part, are tried, true, tested on these 2 lakes. Not necessarily Lanier, not Clark Hill, not someplace else. Oh, it works, but it doesn't work here. So
big difference in those 2 things.
It is, and the last thing is that, which we want to kind of let your viewers know, is we're going to be conducting some seminars. At least 2 a year, maybe, if they take off, maybe more, where we bring in major sponsors like, for example, Lowrance or somebody like that. And one of our pro staff will actually talk about how to read your graphs. Danny White, Randy Jackson are two great fishermen that can tell you what this blip means, and dialing in your Lowrance units, and we'll have Lowrance representatives there as well. So trying to look at the things that we think the fishing community maybe is struggling with, or needs some help, or needs some guidance, or that would be beneficial for them to know a little bit more about it, and try to bring that to the population.
Very much, very much. Well, it's time that we head to the meeting with Jim.
Another meeting?
Another meeting. I appreciate it, buddy.
Thank you so much.
Y'all have fun. Check us both out.